I always thought the only thing Claire loved more than herself was winning. Turns out I came in third. The pregnancy test sat on our granite kitchen counter like a pink plastic accusation, 2 lines glaring at me with mathematical certainty. Claire bounced on her toes, designer yoga pants stretching over what she claimed was already a barely visible bump. Isn't it amazing, Mark, after all these years? Her voice carried that breathless excitement she usually reserved for landing new clients at the law firm. Dr. Martinez says I'm about 6 weeks along. Can you believe it? I could believe a lot of things, that my wife had been working late 3 nights a week for the past 2 months, that she'd suddenly developed a passion for spin class at the country club, that her phone had become surgically attached to her palm, buzzing with mysterious texts that made her smile in ways I hadn't seen in years. What I couldn't believe was that I'd somehow overcome 20 years of sterility. It's incredible, I managed, forcing my voice into something resembling joy. The mumps at age 12 had been thorough in their destruction. 3 different specialists had delivered the same verdict with clinical precision. Structural engineer Mark Fisher would never father children. Claire had accepted this with the same practical efficiency she brought to contract negotiations. She pressed against me, her perfume, something new and expensive, filling my nostrils. I know we'd given up hope, but miracles happen, right? Right. I wrapped my arms around her, feeling like I was hugging a stranger. Over her shoulder, her phone lit up with another text. The contact name was just an initial. D. Miracles. Sure. That evening, Claire disappeared into her home office to catch up on briefs, leaving me alone with my bourbon and a growing certainty that my marriage had become a crime scene. I'd always been good at reading blueprints, understanding how structures held together and where they were most likely to fail. Marriages, apparently, followed similar engineering principles. The signs had been there for months. New lingerie that never made appearances in our bedroom, gym memberships, and sudden interest in her appearance. The way she'd started pronouncing my name with a slight edge, like it left a bad taste. But the pregnancy, that was bold, reckless even. It suggested either supreme confidence or desperate stupidity. With Claire, it could go either way. I pulled out my laptop and started researching private investigators. 3 days later, I sat across from Rita Kowalski in her cramped office above a sandwich shop downtown. She was nothing like the investigators in movies. Middle-aged, practical, with the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd seen every variation of human disappointment. Cheating spouse? She asked, sliding a contract across her desk. Allegedly pregnant cheating spouse, I corrected. Rita's eyebrows rose slightly. Allegedly pregnant? I'm sterile. Have been since childhood. She doesn't know I know. Ah. Rita leaned back in her chair. How long you been married? 5 years next month. Kids? None. Medical impossibility on my end. Rita nodded, making notes. Standard surveillance package runs $1,500 for 2 weeks. Photos, timeline, communications if possible. You want the works? I want everything. I signed the contract with steady hands. And Rita, I'm planning our 5th anniversary party. Big celebration at the country club. I'd like your report before then. She studied my face. Planning something special? You could say that. The next 2 weeks crawled by with excruciating normalcy. Claire maintained her performance with Oscar-worthy dedication. She bought pregnancy books, scheduled doctor appointments, and started a Pinterest board called Baby Fisher Dreams. She even suggested we start looking at minivans. I played my part too. Excited husband-to-be, overwhelmed by the miracle of impending fatherhood. I asked questions about due dates and nursery colors. I researched cribs and strollers with the same methodical attention I brought to load-bearing calculations. Meanwhile, I sent out invitations for our anniversary party. Everyone would be there. Both sets of parents, Claire's law firm colleagues, our entire social circle from the country club. I'd rented the main ballroom, hired a photographer, arranged for champagne service. You're going all out, Claire said, reviewing the guest list. This is really sweet, Mark. 5 years is a milestone, I replied. Plus, we'll have big news to share. She glowed at that, actually glowed. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. The feeling passed. Rita called on a Tuesday. Got everything you need? When do you want to meet? Tonight, somewhere private. We met at Murphy's, a dive bar downtown where the lighting was dim and the clientele minded their own business. Rita slid a manila envelope across the sticky table. Your wife's been busy, she said without preamble. 3 times a week at the Marriott downtown. Always the same room, always the same guy. David Preston. My hand froze halfway to my beer. Dave Preston. You know him? I knew him. Dave Preston, Golden Boy finance manager, member of our country club, husband to Emily, Claire's best friend since law school. Dave, with his perfect smile and his BMW and his trust fund confidence. Dave, who'd always treated me like I was slightly beneath his notice, a blue-collar engineer who'd married above his station. "He's married to my wife's best friend," I said. Rita winced. "That's messier than usual. There's more." She spread photos across the table. Dave and Claire entering the hotel, Dave and Claire in the hotel bar, Dave and Claire in what appeared to be heated conversation in a parking garage. "The pregnancy timing matches up with when they started meeting," Rita continued. "Phone records show constant contact for the past 3 months. Text messages, calls during lunch hours, late-night communications." "Can you get the actual messages?" "Some of them." Rita pulled out her phone, scrolling through screenshots. "Your wife's not great with digital security. She uses the same password for everything." The messages made my stomach turn. Not just the explicit content, though there was plenty of that, but the casual cruelty of their conversations. Claire complaining about my lack of ambition, my boring personality, my pathetic attempts at romance. Dave responding with encouragement, telling her she deserved better, that she was too good for someone like me. The most recent exchange was from yesterday. Dave: "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Same room?" Claire: "Actually, let's take a break for a few days. Mark's been clingy lately." Dave: "He's probably suspicious." Claire: "Mark? Please. He couldn't find his way out of a paper bag if I drew him a map." I set the phone down carefully. "I need one more thing." "What's that?" "Paternity test. I want scientific proof." Rita nodded. "I can arrange that. DNA sample from the baby after birth, or... No, I want it before the party. Hair sample from Claire, comparison with my DNA. I want documentation that I'm not the father. That's unconventional. Can you do it?" Rita studied my face for a long moment. "Yeah, I can do it. Give me 3 days." I left Murphy's with a plan forming in my mind. Claire thought I was stupid, predictable, beneath her notice. Dave thought I was a boring engineer who'd never amount to anything significant. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The paternity results arrived the morning before our anniversary party, delivered by courier in a sealed envelope. I opened it in my workshop in the basement, surrounded by the architectural models and engineering projects that Claire found so tedious. Probability of paternity, 0%. I sat back in my chair, staring at the scientific confirmation of what I'd already known. 20 years of sterility didn't just disappear because my wife wanted it to. Upstairs, I could hear Claire on the phone with Emily, discussing final details for tonight's party. Their laughter drifted down through the floorboards. 2 best friends sharing secrets, planning celebrations, living their lives without a care in the world. That was about to change. I folded the paternity results carefully and slipped them into my jacket pocket right next to the photos Rita had provided. Tonight, in front of everyone who mattered in our social circle, Claire would make her grand announcement. She'd tell the room that we were expecting our first child, that after years of trying, we'd finally been blessed with a miracle. And then I'd tell them about the real miracle, how my sterile husband had somehow managed to father a child with her best friend's husband. I checked my watch. 6 hours until the party. 6 hours until I revealed exactly what kind of man Claire had married. She thought I was the wrong man for her. Tonight, she'd discover I was exactly the right kind of bastard. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The Riverside Country Club looked perfect for a massacre. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables draped in white linen, champagne flutes arranged in precise rows, flowers arranged with the kind of expensive casualness that screamed success. Claire had insisted on roses, white and pink, symbolizing new beginnings. I stood near the bar, adjusting my tie and watching guests arrive. My parents came first. Dad uncomfortable in his rental tux, Mom clutching her purse like a shield against the country club atmosphere. They'd never quite understood how their engineer son had ended up in this world of trust funds and tennis lessons. "Beautiful party, Mark," Mom said, kissing my cheek. "Claire must be so excited about the announcement." "She's practically glowing," I agreed. Claire's parents arrived next, Judge Harrison and his wife Margaret, pillars of the legal community who'd always viewed me as a temporary inconvenience in their daughter's upward trajectory. They nodded politely in my direction before gravitating toward the other lawyers and judges scattered throughout the room. Then came the main players. Emily Preston entered with her usual grace, stunning in a navy dress that probably cost more than my car payment. She hugged Claire with genuine affection, 2 best friends celebrating a milestone. Behind her, Dave Preston made his entrance like he was walking onto a movie set. Perfectly styled hair, designer suit, that practiced smile that had charmed its way through a dozen corporate promotions. "Mark!" Dave approached with his hand extended, the picture of masculine camaraderie. "Hell of a party. You really went all out." I shook his hand, squeezing just a little harder than necessary. "Only the best for Claire." "She's a special woman," Dave said, his eyes already scanning the room for more important people to schmooze. "You're a lucky guy." I'm beginning to realize just how lucky. Dave's smile flickered slightly at my tone, but before he could respond, Claire appeared at my elbow in a flowing dress that artfully concealed her supposedly pregnant figure. "Dave, I'm so glad you could make it." She hugged him with the casual intimacy of old friends, but I caught the way her hand lingered on his arm, the brief look that passed between them. "Wouldn't miss it," Dave replied smoothly. "Emily and I were just saying how excited we are for your big announcement." Emily joined our little circle, champagne in hand. "Claire's been so mysterious about tonight. She won't tell me anything except that it's going to be life-changing." "Oh, it will be," I said. "For everyone." The party filled up quickly. Claire's law firm colleagues, neighbors from our subdivision, couples from the country club social scene. Everyone who mattered in our carefully constructed upper-middle-class existence. I'd made sure of that when I'd compiled the guest list. Nina Rodriguez from Claire's firm cornered me near the appetizer table. "This is so romantic, Mark. Claire's been absolutely radiant lately. Whatever you've been doing, keep it up." "Just trying to be the husband she deserves," I replied. Len Murphy, my drinking buddy from Murphy's Bar, looked wildly out of place among the lawyers and bankers, but had cleaned up well for the occasion. He raised his beer in my direction. "This is some fancy setup, Fisher. You sure know how to throw a party. Wait until you see the entertainment." As the evening progressed, I watched Dave and Claire navigate the room with practiced skill, never appearing together for too long, never making their connection obvious. They were good at this, probably had been conducting their affair right under everyone's noses for months. Emily seemed genuinely happy, chatting with other wives about vacation plans and home renovations. She had no idea her husband was sleeping with her best friend. No clue that the baby Claire would announce tonight belonged to the man she'd been married to for 8 years. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. At 8:30, the photographer I'd hired signaled that he was ready. I'd been very specific about my requirements. Multiple angles, high resolution, plenty of shots of the crowd's reactions. Tonight would be documented from every possible perspective. "Ladies and gentlemen," I called out, tapping my champagne flute with a knife. The room gradually quieted, conversations dying as attention focused on the small stage area where Claire and I stood. "Thank you all for being here tonight," I began. 5 years ago, I married the most ambitious, determined woman I'd ever met. Claire has exceeded every expectation, succeeded at everything she's attempted, and tonight we have some incredible news to share." Applause rippled through the room. Claire beamed beside me, her hand finding mine in a gesture of marital unity. "But before we get to that," I continued, "I want to say something about marriage, about trust, about the kind of partnership that makes two people stronger together than they could ever be apart." More nods and smiles from the audience. Judge Harrison looked pleased that his son-in-law was finally showing some appropriate sentiment. "Marriage is built on honesty," I said, "on sharing your deepest secrets, your greatest fears, your most important news. So when Claire told me about her pregnancy, I was overwhelmed." The room erupted in surprised gasps and enthusiastic applause. Several people called out congratulations. Emily squealed and rushed forward to hug Claire, tears in her eyes. "I was overwhelmed," I repeated once the noise died down, "because I've been sterile since childhood. Medically impossible for me to father children. Has been for 20 years. The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a champagne bubble pop. Claire's smile froze on her face. "Mark, what are you—" "So imagine my confusion," I continued conversationally. "When my wife announced she was carrying my baby, I thought, surely this is a mistake. Maybe the tests were wrong. Maybe miracles really do happen." I reached into my jacket and pulled out the paternity report. So I had some testing done. Turns out, no miracle. I'm definitely not the father. The crowd was silent now, 100 people frozen in social horror. Judge Harrison's face had gone purple. My mother looked like she might faint. "But here's the thing about structural engineering," I said, unfolding the report. "When something doesn't add up, you investigate, you dig deeper, you find out where the system failed." Claire grabbed my arm. "Mark, stop this. You're embarrassing yourself." "Am I?" I smiled at her. "Because I think the embarrassing part is just getting started." I nodded to Rita, who was positioned near the back of the room with a laptop. The lights dimmed, and a projection screen descended from the ceiling, a feature I'd specifically requested when booking the venue. The first photo appeared. Claire and Dave entering the Marriott Hotel. Emily's gasp was audible across the room. The second photo, Claire and Dave in an intimate embrace in the hotel bar. Dave had gone white as his dress shirt. The third photo, Claire and Dave kissing in a parking garage. 6 weeks pregnant, I announced to the stunned crowd, which corresponds exactly with when these photos were taken. Amazing how the timeline works out. Claire was shaking now, her carefully constructed composure crumbling. This is insane. Mark, you're having some kind of breakdown. The only thing breaking down is your story, I interrupted. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the sound system I'd had installed for the evening. Dave's voice filled the room, crystal clear through the speakers. She deserves better than some boring engineer who'll never amount to anything. Claire's voice responded, Mark's so predictable. He has no idea what's been going on. Sometimes I think he's actually brain dead. Dave again? When are you going to tell him about the baby? Claire, at the anniversary party, in front of everyone. It'll be perfect. He'll never suspect anything. The recording ended. The room remained frozen in shocked silence. Emily Preston stood in the middle of the crowd, tears streaming down her face, staring at her husband with naked betrayal. Dave, is this true? Dave opened his mouth, closed it, looked around the room like a trapped animal. Emily, I can explain. Is it true? She screamed. The room erupted. Judge Harrison was shouting at Claire. My mother was crying. Several guests were already heading for the exits, eager to escape the social carnage. But I wasn't finished. There's one more thing, I called out, my voice cutting through the chaos. The room quieted again, everyone eager for the final blow. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a thick manila envelope. See, adultery is one thing. But theft? That's a whole different level of betrayal. Dave's face went from white to green. For the past 6 months, my wife and her lover have been stealing proprietary designs from my engineering firm, architectural plans for the Morrison Downtown Development Project. They've been selling them to Dave's company, allowing them to underbid us by exactly the amount they'd save on design costs. I opened the envelope and scattered documents across the nearest table. Email chains, file transfers, payment records, everything documented. Dave bolted for the exit, but Len Murphy and 2 of my coworkers were blocking the door. They weren't threatening him, just standing there, drinks in hand, chatting casually about the weather. Leaving so soon, Dave? I called out. But we haven't gotten to the best part yet. I turned to address the crowd one final time. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to know that as of this morning, divorce papers have been filed. All joint accounts have been frozen pending investigation. And first thing Monday morning, both the State Bar Association and Dave's employer will receive copies of everything you've seen tonight. Claire finally found her voice. You bastard. You planned this whole thing. I planned a party, I corrected. You planned the entertainment. She lunged at me, but Emily intercepted her, grabbing Claire by the shoulders. How could you? Emily sobbed. You're my best friend. I trusted you. Emily, please. Emily slapped her. Hard. The sound echoed through the silent ballroom. Don't. Emily's voice was ice cold now. Don't say another word to me. Ever. She turned to Dave, who was still trapped by the human wall at the exit. I want you out of our house tonight. I'm calling my father's attorney first thing in the morning. Emily, wait. But Emily was already walking away, her heels clicking against the marble floor with military precision. The crowd began to disperse in earnest now, guests fleeing the scene of social destruction. But many lingered, unable to resist watching the final act of the drama. Claire stood alone in the middle of the ballroom, her perfect dress, her perfect makeup, her perfect life all in ruins around her. She looked at me with pure hatred. You think you've won, she hissed. You think this makes you better than me? I think this makes us even, I replied calmly. I'll destroy you for this. I'll take everything you have. I smiled. Good luck with that. You might want to focus on finding a new job first. And a new place to live. The house is in my name, remember? Wedding gift from my parents. Her face crumpled then, the reality of her situation finally sinking in. No job, no money, no friends, no husband, no lover. Just a pregnancy that would serve as a permanent reminder of her spectacular fall from grace. Dave finally managed to push past the crowd at the exit, but not before I called out one last time. Dave, congratulations on becoming a father. Hope you're better at that than you were at being a husband. He fled into the night without looking back. The party was over. The guests were gone. The staff was cleaning up the wreckage of what should have been a celebration. I stood alone in the empty ballroom, surrounded by wilted roses and abandoned champagne glasses, and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Claire thought I was the wrong man for her. She was right. I was exactly the wrong kind of man to cross. The next morning brought a silence so complete it felt like the world had ended. No phone calls, no text messages, no social media notifications. Our house, my house now, technically, sat in perfect suburban quiet while the rest of our social circle processed the nuclear explosion that had been our anniversary party. Claire was gone. She'd disappeared sometime during the night, taking only a suitcase and her car. She'd left her wedding ring on the kitchen counter next to a note that contained just 2 words, "Screw you." I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through the aftermath on social media. The country club wives were having a field day. Cryptic posts about shocking revelations and people showing their true colors flooded my feeds. Nina Rodriguez from Claire's law firm had posted a long, rambling status about the importance of supporting friends through difficult times that had already generated 47 comments. My phone buzzed with a text from Rita. "Saw the news? Hell of a party. You need anything else? Call me." Another from Len. "Holy shit, Fisher. Remind me never to piss you off." And surprisingly, one from Emily. "Thank you. I know that couldn't have been easy. I'm sorry you had to go through this too." I was crafting a response to Emily when my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Detective Ray Ahern, a weathered Irish cop I'd met a few times at community events. He stood on my porch with the patient expression of someone who'd seen every variation of human stupidity. "Morning, Mark. Got a minute?" I opened the door. "If this is about last night, everything I presented was legally obtained." Ahern smiled. "Relax. I'm not here officially. Just wanted to make sure you're okay. Word travels fast in a town this size." "I'm fine. Better than fine, actually." "Mind if I come in? Coffee smells good." I led him to the kitchen, poured him a cup. Ahern settled into a chair with a grunt, studying my face. "Hell of a thing," he said finally. "Your wife and Dave Preston. Emily's a good woman. Didn't deserve that." "No, she didn't." "You planned this whole thing out ahead of time." I met his eyes. "I planned a party. They provided the drama." Ahern chuckled. "Smart answer. For what it's worth, I think you handled it about as well as anyone could. Public humiliation's not illegal, and from what I hear, they had it coming." "Anything else I should know about?" "Dave's employer called this morning. They're conducting their own investigation into the stolen designs. If what you presented last night checks out, he's looking at criminal charges." "It'll check out?" "I figured." Ahern finished his coffee and stood. "One piece of advice? Watch your back for a while. People like Dave don't handle humiliation well. Sometimes they do stupid things." After Ahern left, I spent the morning fielding calls from reporters. Word had spread beyond our social circle. Apparently, public marital destruction at country clubs made for good local news. I declined all interviews with polite efficiency. The real entertainment came from watching Dave's world collapse in real time. His LinkedIn profile disappeared first. Then his company's website was updated, removing him from the executive team page. By noon, Emily had posted a single Facebook status. "Effective immediately, I am filing for divorce from David Preston. I will not be making any further public statements about this matter." The comments section exploded with support for Emily and thinly veiled shots at Dave and Claire. Around 2 o'clock, my phone rang. Claire's number. "Hello, Claire." "You bastard." Her voice was raw, like she'd been crying or screaming. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I have a pretty good idea." "I've been fired. Suspended pending investigation, then fired. They're talking about reporting me to the Bar Association." "Actions have consequences." "And Dave's been arrested. Corporate theft charges. They raided his office this morning." I hadn't expected that to move so quickly, but I wasn't surprised. Dave's company took intellectual property theft seriously, especially when it involved millions of dollars in development contracts. "Where are you, Claire?" "None of your business." "It is if you're carrying Dave's baby, child support, custody arrangements. We'll need to sort all that out legally." Silence on the other end. Then, "There is no baby." I set down my coffee cup. "What?" "There is no baby, Mark. There never was. The pregnancy test was fake. You can buy them online. Positive pregnancy tests from women who actually are pregnant." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. "Why?" "Because I thought you might be suspicious about the affair. I thought if you believed I was pregnant with your child, you'd be so happy you'd stop paying attention to everything else. But the doctor's appointments. I never went to any doctor. It was all fake, Mark. The whole thing." I sat in my kitchen, processing this information. Claire had faked an entire pregnancy to cover up her affair. She'd bought fake pregnancy tests, lied about doctor visits, started planning a nursery, all to throw me off the scent. You're telling me you stood up in front of 100 people and announced a fake pregnancy? I thought you'd play along. I thought you'd be so caught up in the moment that you wouldn't question it. Then later, I'd fake a miscarriage and we'd move on. The audacity was breathtaking. So there's no baby. No baby, no pregnancy. Just me, unemployed and humiliated, thanks to your little revenge fantasy. My revenge fantasy? Claire, you've been sleeping with your best friend's husband for months. You stole proprietary designs from my company. You lied about being pregnant with my child, which was impossible anyway, since I'm sterile and you knew it. I made mistakes. You made choices. And now you're living with the consequences. I want half of everything, Mark. The house, your retirement accounts, everything. Good luck with that. Adultery affects asset division in this state, plus the theft charges might complicate things for you. You bastard. So you keep saying. She hung up. I sat in my kitchen, staring at my phone, trying to process the fact that there had never been a baby. Claire had been so desperate to cover her tracks that she'd fabricated an entire pregnancy, knowing I was sterile, planning to fake a miscarriage later. The woman I'd married was a stranger. That evening, Emily called. Mark, I hope I'm not bothering you. Not at all. How are you holding up? I've been better. Her voice was steady but tired. I wanted to thank you again for last night. I know it must have been horrible for you too. It needed to be done. Can I ask you something? How long did you know? About 2 weeks. I hired a private investigator when Claire announced the pregnancy. The pregnancy, Emily's voice turned bitter. Dave told me this morning there was no baby, that it was all fake. Claire told me the same thing. So she lied about being pregnant to cover up sleeping with my husband, who was lying to me about working late to cover up sleeping with my best friend. That about sums it up. Emily was quiet for a long moment. I feel like such an idiot. You're not an idiot. You trusted people you should have been able to trust. I keep thinking about all the times they were together, all the lies. Claire would call me after she'd been with Dave, asking about my day, pretending to care about my problems. I'm sorry, Emily. Are you, or are you glad it's over? I considered the question. Both, I think. Yeah, me too. We talked for another hour, two people picking through the wreckage of their marriages, trying to make sense of the betrayal. Emily was stronger than I'd given her credit for. Hurt, but not broken. She'd already retained a lawyer, frozen joint accounts, and started the process of untangling 8 years of shared life. What happens now? She asked as our conversation wound down. Now we move on, build something better. Think we can do that? I think we have to try. After Emily hung up, I walked through my house. The house Claire had decorated, filled with furniture she'd chosen, artwork she'd selected. Everything was a reminder of the life we'd built together, the future we'd planned. Tomorrow, I'd start the process of making it mine. New paint, new furniture, new memories. The marriage was over, but my life wasn't. Claire had called me the wrong man for her. She was right. I was too honest for her games, too straightforward for her manipulations, too decent for her betrayals. But I was exactly the right man to make sure she faced the consequences of her choices. And that was enough. 3 weeks after the party, Dave Preston's mugshot appeared on the front page of the local newspaper. The headline read, Local finance executive charged with corporate theft. The article detailed how he'd stolen proprietary architectural designs worth over $2 million, selling them to competitors and pocketing kickbacks. I read it over coffee in my newly redecorated kitchen, surrounded by boxes of Claire's belongings that she still hadn't collected. The house felt different now, lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted from the foundation. My phone rang, Emily's name on the caller ID. Did you see the paper? She asked without preamble. Reading it now. How are you doing? Better than I expected. My lawyer says Dave's criminal charges will actually help with the divorce. Makes it harder for him to claim he deserves half our assets when he's facing prison time. That's good news. There's more. I got a call from someone at Claire's old law firm. Apparently she's been blacklisted. Word got around about the theft and the fake pregnancy. No respectable firm will touch her. I felt a flicker of something that might have been sympathy. Might have been. Where is she now? Living with her parents. Judge Harrison is reportedly furious. His daughter's scandal is affecting his reputation in legal circles. The irony was perfect. Claire had always been Daddy's little princess, the brilliant daughter who could do no wrong. Now she was a professional pariah living in her childhood bedroom, unemployed and unemployable. Mark, can I ask you something? Sure. Do you ever feel guilty about how public it all was? I considered the question. No, do you? Sometimes. Then I remember how they talked about us in those recordings, how they laughed about deceiving us, and the guilt goes away. They made their choices in public. They just didn't realize how public until it was too late. That afternoon, I drove to Murphy's Bar for my weekly drink with Len. The place was busier than usual, filled with the kind of people who appreciated a good revenge story. I'd become something of a local celebrity, the quiet engineer who'd orchestrated the most spectacular marital destruction in recent memory. Fisher, Len called out as I entered. Man of the hour. What are you drinking? Bourbon. Make it a double. Len poured the drink and leaned across the bar. You hear about Dave? Saw it in the paper. Gets better. My cousin works at the courthouse. Says Dave's been trying to make a plea deal, but the prosecutor's not interested. They want to make an example of him. How long is he looking at? 5 to 10, if convicted. Corporate theft's a felony, especially when it involves that kind of money. I sipped my bourbon, processing this information. I'd wanted Dave to face consequences for his actions, but prison seemed almost excessive. Almost. You feel bad for him? Len asked, reading my expression. I feel bad for Emily. She's going to have to deal with the aftermath while he's locked up. Emily's tougher than she looks. She'll be fine. A commotion near the door caught my attention. Dave Preston stumbled into the bar, looking like he'd aged 10 years in 3 weeks. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his expensive clothes wrinkled and stained. He scanned the room with bloodshot eyes until he spotted me. You, he snarled, pushing through the crowd. You jerk. The bar went quiet. Every conversation stopped as people turned to watch the confrontation. Dave reached my table and swayed slightly, clearly drunk. You destroyed my life. I exposed your choices, I replied calmly. There's a difference. Choices? Dave's voice rose to a shout. You planned the whole thing. You set us up. I planned a party. You chose to steal from my company and sleep with my wife. She came on to me. Dave was drawing attention from the entire bar now. Claire seduced me. I never wanted any of this. Len moved closer, ready to intervene if things got physical. But I remained seated, calm. Funny, I said. That's not what the recordings suggest. You seemed pretty enthusiastic about the whole thing. Dave lunged at me, but his coordination was shot. I simply leaned back in my chair as he stumbled past, crashing into an empty table. You want to know the truth? Dave struggled to his feet, pointing an accusatory finger. Your wife was miserable. She hated you. She said you were boring and pathetic, and yet she still married me, I interrupted. Still lived in my house, spent my money, enjoyed the life I provided. If I was so terrible, she could have left any time. Dave opened his mouth to respond, then seemed to deflate. The fight went out of him as suddenly as it had arrived. I've lost everything, he said quietly. My job, my wife, my house. I'm facing prison time. My own parents won't return my calls. You made your choices, Dave. So did you. You chose revenge over forgiveness. You chose destruction over mercy. I stood up, looking down at the man who'd helped destroy my marriage. You're right. I chose to make sure everyone knew exactly who you really are, and I'd make the same choice again. Dave stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked out of the bar without another word. Damn, Len said, returning to his position behind the bar. That was cold, Fisher. Was it wrong? Nah, guy had it coming. But still, cold. The next morning brought a knock at my door. Claire stood on my porch, looking smaller somehow than I remembered. She'd lost weight, and her usually perfect appearance was disheveled. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she wasn't sleeping well. We need to talk, she said. About what? About ending this. About moving on. I stepped aside to let her in. She walked through the house she'd once decorated, looking at the changes I'd made. New paint, different furniture. All traces of our shared life systematically erased. You've been busy, she said. I had some redecorating to do. We sat in the living room, two strangers who'd once shared a bed, a life, a future. I want to apologize, Claire said, for all of it. The affair, the lies, the theft. I know I hurt you. Is this your lawyer's advice? This is me trying to salvage whatever dignity I have left. I studied her face, looking for signs of genuine remorse. Why, Claire? Why did you do it? She was quiet for a long moment. Because I felt trapped. Because I married you when I was 27 and scared of being alone. Because Dave represented everything I thought I wanted. Money, status, excitement. And now? Now I realize I threw away something real for something that was never going to last. You threw away something real for something that didn't even exist, I corrected. Dave was never going to leave Emily. You were never going to get the life you thought you wanted. I know that now. What do you want from me, Claire? I want you to call off your lawyer. Stop fighting the divorce settlement. Let me have something to start over with. You committed adultery and theft. In this state, that affects asset division. I'm begging you, Mark. I have nothing. No job, no prospects, no friends. I'm 32 years old and living with my parents. You should have thought about that before you decided to destroy our marriage. Claire's composure finally cracked. Tears streamed down her face as she pleaded with me. Please, I know I don't deserve mercy, but I'm asking for it anyway. Help me start over. I looked at the woman I'd once loved, reduced to begging in the living room of the house she'd once called home. For a moment, I felt something that might have been pity. The moment passed. You made your choices, Claire. Now live with them. She stared at me through her tears. You've changed. The Mark I married would have forgiven me. The Mark you married was naive enough to trust you. That Mark is gone. Claire wiped her eyes and stood. I hope someday you can find it in your heart to forgive me. I already have, I said. Forgiveness doesn't mean you escape consequences. She left without another word. I watched through the window as she drove away, probably for the last time. That evening, Emily called with news. Dave took a plea deal, she said. 3 years minimum security prison, 5 years probation, full restitution to your company. How do you feel about that? Relieved. I was dreading a trial, having to testify about our marriage, reliving all the lies. And the divorce? Final next week. I get the house, most of our assets. Dave's lawyer advised him not to fight it, given the circumstances. That's good news. What about you and Claire? Divorce should be final next month. She came by today, asking me to be more generous with the settlement. And? I told her to live with her choices. Emily was quiet for a moment. Do you think we're being too harsh? I mean, yes, they betrayed us, but we've destroyed their lives. They destroyed their own lives. We just made sure everyone knew about it. I suppose you're right. Emily, are you okay? Really okay. I'm getting there. Some days are harder than others, but I'm building something new. Something that's just mine. Good for you. What about you? Any plans for the future? I looked around my redecorated house at the life I was building from the ashes of my marriage. I'm thinking about taking a vacation, maybe traveling somewhere I've never been. That sounds perfect. After Emily hung up, I poured myself a bourbon and stepped onto my back deck. The neighborhood was quiet, families settling in for the evening, living their normal, uncomplicated lives. 3 months ago, I'd been one of them, a married man with a routine existence, blissfully unaware that my wife was systematically betraying me. Now I was divorced, vindicated, and free to build whatever life I wanted. Claire had called me the wrong man for her. She was absolutely right. I was too honest for her games, too principled for her schemes, too decent for her betrayals. But I was exactly the right man to make sure she faced the full consequences of her choices, and that was enough. More than enough.